Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to our lecture number 2 of the Atlas Exchanging Knowledge lecture series. Today on Practice Research PhD's in Interior Design with Dr. Suzie Attiwill and Dr. Tüüne-Kristin Vaikkla. My name is Miriam Dreyer. I'm the Atlas researcher for the ECIA, and I'll give you maybe a bit of context of today's lecture and event. So the ECIA stands for the European Council of Interior Architects, and it's the representative body of all the many organizations all across Europe that represent many thousands of interior architects and designers. We currently hold 18 member states and also associations that then hold interior architects and designers. And recently we've been awarded an EU grant for a special project, which is called the BCSP project, and it stands for Building on Connections for a Stronger Profession in our discipline across Europe. And it is really concerned about knowledge exchange in our case, because the Atlas project, as we like to call it, is one of those sub-projects that are EU funded. Now, the BCSP is concerned with promoting diversity, strength, and the wonderful work that we do within our field all across Europe. And it is uniting this under one theme, which is different cultures, shared values, one profession, which I find very beautiful. And the Atlas project, which led us here today, is called Knowledge Exchange, and it is an EU-funded project that is run by Professor Graham Brooker as the project manager and myself as the Atlas researcher. And we had a conversation about what exchanging knowledge means to us. And it was really about exchanging the knowledge and the rich and diverse expertise that people bring into this field and sharing it with everyone so that we can broaden the body of knowledge that exists within our discipline. And so the outcome of the conversation was one aspect, which is the Atlas Archive. Now, some might have already been more familiar with it and some might not. So the Atlas Archive is going to be a digital online repository of all things interior architecture and design, which will effectively become a massive library of all different pieces and works, and an archive of all interior activity across Europe. It's currently being made. It's under production by Field Studio from the UK, which are brilliant graphic designers, and will probably launch by spring next year. And it will then, Graham calls it, be the go-to wiki interior. So it will be holding a broad range of knowledge from adaptive reuse over interior theory, the Green New Deal, and so on and so forth. At that have many different types of media represented, such as podcasts, talks, recorded events like these ones here, and the whole myriad of books, publications, and so on and so forth. Now, in order to make this known and bring it out into the world and develop interest for the Atlas Archive until it launches, we have set up the Atlas Archive lecture series, which is a running lecture series with one lecture each month, which started last month with a wonderful talk with Graham Brooker and Silke Langenberg from ETH Zurich on building repair. And Graham Brooker is the head of interior design at the Royal College of Art and even concerned with adaptive reuse. So there was some conversation around repair and reuse there. This is number 2 out of 6 different talks. And I will introduce our special guests for today shortly. For the next one, mark your calendars. It will be on the 15th of November on the city of proximity, an emerging scenario for sustainable and resilient cities with Dr. Albert Foster and Professor Ezio Manzini. So also special guests there for November. The next one then after that would be mid-December, and we will have Dr. Inge Sommers with us, together with Professor Dr. B. Plewitz on as found experiments in preservation. And then for next year, we will have Matthew Freeman and Joanna Cloyd talking about health and well-being in interior design, and as well Anja Dirks in conversation with Masi Mohammadi on the topic of smart architectural technology in the domestic space. So very diverse and rich topics that we feel are quite relevant for our discipline at the moment. But now this talk today for me is a real privilege and honor to introduce. We have with us today Dr. Suzie Attiwill, and all the way from Australia, and Dr. Tüüne-Kristin Vaikla from Estonia, sharing some of their invaluable insights on practice research PhDs, starting with a lecture from Suzie called Philosophy in Practice. Dr. Tüüne-Kristin Vaikla is a spatial researcher and interior architect. Her PhD focused on questions resulting from the transformation of buildings, and she's currently an adjunct professor of interior design at RMIT University in Melbourne, Australia, and currently working on spatial values of architectural heritage at the Tallinn Urban Planning Office. She will today be leading the conversation on practice research PhDs with Suzie Attiwill, who's also a professor of interior design at the School of Architecture and Urban Design at the RMIT University in Melbourne. So I'm sure they'll have some very precious, invaluable insights of their practice together for us to share. So Dr. Suzie Attiwill, before she joined the RMIT in 2000, she worked as a curator and exhibition designer and was artistic director of Craft Victoria. From 2018 to 2021, Suzie was Associate Dean at RMIT Interior Design, and she currently leads the Practice Research PhD Interior Design cohort in Australia, Europe, and Asia. We are very, very happy to have you both here today. Tüüne-Kristin, Suzie, this is your stage.
Yeah. Thank you, Miriam, very much for your great introduction. So now we know more where we are and who are here. I also want to thank you, Graham, for being possible to be part of Atlas Working Group and to work together with you. And really happy that Suzie has now today with us. Thanks for the contribution already. I just say briefly that we met with Suzie in Melbourne. I was very honored to work with her one semester in RMIT. And later she has been visiting Estonia several times in our interior architecture symposium. And we are working together also in Barcelona, practice-based research events. Okay, Suzie, if everybody's ready, then we are like big ears.
Yeah, good. Well, I hope everyone's ready. And I mean, and thanks very much Tüüne-Kristin for your introduction, and Miriam, and also Graham, and to ECIA. It's fantastic to be able to join you with this project and exchange some knowledge. So yeah, I just oh no, it's not going to do it. Sorry, it's kind of, I'm not sure what, sorry, I just had this problem before. I'm just going to have to stop sharing and reshare this silly. Sorry about this. Great start, but let's just see. Let's see how we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is Melbourne, and if you can see the pointer here, like you can see this black and white building, and just below it is this sort of square rectangular building. So I'm just sitting in that right at this moment on level 8, and this is the RMIT Design Hub, and no one else is here because it's 7 p.m. on a Friday night, so everybody's started their weekend and probably out having a drink. But I just wanted to have this slide up just to locate me, and also just to talk very briefly. I'm going to have to be talking very briefly and fairly quickly to get through what I need to get through. But this is a building just in the back of the black and white striped building that you can sort of see is actually a portrait of a face. And this is a building by Ashton Raggett McDougall, Melbourne-based architects. And it's actually a facade that is the face is being produced through balconies. So the white that you see is the actual balcony facade, and then the black is the receding balcony. And this is actually a portrait of William Barrack. And William Barrack is a respected cultural Indigenous elder of the Wurundjeri people who was alive in the second half of the 1800s. And he was a really key figure in Melbourne who, represented Indigenous people in terms of negotiations with Europeans. And so it's a really significant, this building was done in 2015. And so William Barrack effectively overlooks Melbourne. And it's really important also because here at RMIT, we always begin any meeting that we have, even internationally, with an acknowledgement of the people of the Wurrung and Boonwurrung language group on whose unceded lands the university conducts its teaching, research, and business, and pay respect to elders past and present and emerging. And also to acknowledge traditional custodians and their ancestors of the lands and waters across Australia and the world, and also to I pay my respect to any Indigenous people who are attending this talk. So what I want to do is first, in this 25 minutes, I want to introduce the Practice Research PhD, with focusing on what we offer at RMIT and specifically, and acknowledging that there are many, many other practice research PhDs, but there's the one that we offer at RMIT is distinctive and particular, and I wanted to speak about this in relationship to the potential for the discipline of interior design, interior architecture. And then I want to follow with some portraits, if you like, of some of the interior design candidates who have graduated and who are still in process. And then if we've got time to follow on with some reflection on the current state, and indeed why there's not many interior designers actually doing PhDs, and the potential here and thinking about this. And Tüüne-Kristin and I will sort of move into having a discussion and open it up for questions from there. So, there are many versions of practice PhDs, including practice-led and practice-based, and each with different inflections and program designs. And as I said, I want to focus here very specifically on a distinctive mode of practice research PhD that's offered here at RMIT in Melbourne since the early 1990s. And then more recently, we also have a program in Barcelona and also Ho Chi Minh City, which attracts practitioners from around the regions of Europe, UK, USA, and Asia. And also just within this model of practice research PhD, there's many disciplines that participate, and there's also slightly different modes of how this practice research happens. There's the reflective industry mode, which is primarily what I want to focus on here, because I understand that I'm talking to a number of practitioners, and also academics who are established academics. And then there's also the generative practice research mode, which is often about more like generating from an emerging practice. And so just here this is a cover for a book called The Pink Book by Practice by Invitation. And it's been edited primarily by Leon van Schaik, Professor Leon van Schaik, who is responsible for starting up this practice research PhD program back in the 1990s, when it was primarily as a master's and then became PhD. And so, as you can see here, it's been established since 1986. And this is a collection of PhDs from that period up until 2011. And this is Leon himself giving a lecture on the PhD program. And he's now sort of emeritus professor. He's in semi-retirement. But the thing that motivated Leon, his background is having studied and done his PhD at the Architectural Association, the AA, in the UK. And it was focused on the architect John Soane. And Leon speaks about like what motivated him in his PhD back, number of decades ago, was the fact that so many people had written about what John Soane did, and historians and theoreticians, but no one really spoke about how he did it. And so for Leon, this is really sort of critical aspect with the practice research PhD, is an invitation to people to think through and with their practice, and to be articulating and bringing forth the how rather than the what or research about it. So, this is Leon in terms of sort of communicating, thinking through some of the ideas. He uses what he terms ideograms, and this is on the left, to articulate and spatialize and to sort of offer up a way of understanding how these various different ideas around the PhD and indeed sort of the research works. And so on the left, you can sort of see that one of the foundational ideas is that it's actually research in the medium of design itself. And so this is, it's recognizing that there's other sort of valuable research where research is about things and it's for design. But this is actually where the practice itself is the site of the research. And I think this is really kind of what really distinguishes the nature of this practice research PhD. And so how this happens then is there's an invitation to practitioners to come in and do the PhD. They don't have to leave their practice, and indeed Leon often says if the PhD takes you out of your practice, then it's not practice research PhD. And so practitioners continue to work full-time in their practices because they're, in fact, by working, they're actually doing the research. And so the PhD, often it's kind of considered conceptually as sort of another project in the office. It sits in the office, and, like it's kind of quite sort of fantastic in a way, because then the office also becomes aware of the kind of criticality of doing something like this project, like a PhD, which is, not like a commercial project as such, where there's clients and budgets and things, but it is a project, and sort of has this sense of carving out a space in the office for a different kind of engagement with the practice, a sort of reflection on the practice, a reflection through the practice. And so you can see here, it's research in the medium of design itself. And just, this is an earlier sort of poster that was done for the PhD program, a must program. But I think it's just really, I'll put it in here because, I mean, this program has really had substantial sort of investment from architects who have been really interested in it to do it, and less so from interior designers and interior architects. And I guess this is my provocation and invitation to people listening here to really think, well, why is a PhD sort of less interest or less concern to our profession, to our discipline? And indeed, as is pointed out here on the right, that architects and designers have a responsibility to the furtherance of their practice domain, and that this examination of the nature of their mastery promotes and extends the fundamental knowledge base of their profession, and thus its ability to serve society. So I think this is a really sort of a key thing that the PhD kind of can do and can offer up, not only to one's own practice, but to the profession and to how the discipline is situated more broadly within the context of society. I'm sorry, this keeps freezing and I don't know why. It's very annoying. I'll just have to go out of it and share it again. It's very, sorry about this. So this is Professor Richard Blythe is another kind of key figure, following on from Leon, who Richard was, he no longer is, Dean of our school. And so he further articulated also through the use of ideograms, the nature of the practice research PhD. And so this is a drawing that he's done, which you can sort of perhaps understand further this idea of how, you know, like the practice and the project, sort of in terms of becoming involved in a PhD. He refers to it as a runway of projects that sort of enter in and go through this reflection model, where it's sort of, you know, that what happens is that there's a reflection through and in and on as it moves through. And in terms of understanding how, you know, some of the kind of, it's referred to as the sort of tacit knowledge that sits within practice, the material spatial intelligence that can be then sort of brought out through this process of doing a PhD. Yeah, there's the way that it's kind of actually formally structured. So there's what we call the Practice Research Symposium. This happens twice a year. Happens twice a year in the various different locations. So in Melbourne and in Saigon, Ho Chi Minh City, and in Barcelona. And these symposiums, at each symposium, the people who are in the region who are doing the PhDs all come together for this symposium where they present their work in progress and also present what's called milestones and also present for examination. And this is a really kind of key aspect of also the practice research PhD, is the bringing together of people who are doing the PhDs as peers and spending a couple of days together to really share and discuss, and critique each other's work. And it's kind of an extraordinary moment because it's sort of quite a different environment than from how people are used to within their practice and within, you know, talking to clients and, you know, actually one of the striking things that's often spoken about is this practice research model is extraordinary because people who are normally competitors in a commercial environment will come together and share their knowledge and share their practice. And it's this thing that the PhD offers up is just a way of pausing in relationship to, you know, like projects have deadlines and budgets that really shape and determine them, and one moves from project to project. And the PhD, because it goes over a period of 4 years, is something that has this continuity where you're able to kind of reflect and think through, and with projects both past and present and those in the future, in relationship to these kind of emerging key ideas and key aspects of your own practice that inform it and have informed it indeed for decades. And, you know, like the practice research symposiums are always this important kind of social time to come together, but that's not all that happens. There's these presentations, so where it's really an opportunity to go into the projects and into the work, open them out and offer them up, and to think critically about them and with others, with people who are on the panels, and also these are public events, so there's others that are there who participate in the conversation. And then there's also accompanying these PRSs, you know, PhDs are examined. So, but the examinations that are here with the practice research PhD is that there is what we call an exhibit of practice. And so every examination involves an exhibit like this. We don't call it an exhibition because it's not an art exhibition as such, but an exhibit and a verbal presentation in front of 2 examiners. And also, as you can see here, it's a public event. And then prior to that this public examination, there's also a dissertation that's sent, which is between 30 to 55,000 words that the examiners will read beforehand. And it's really kind of critical with the practice research PhD that it's the practice that sort of is foregrounded. So it's not all about being in the text. It's not that text is the main sort of conveyor and body and authority of knowledge, that actually, that, you know, it's really that this exhibit of practice and the verbal presentation has as much sort of importance and value in terms of understanding what the PhD is. And this whole event is filmed, And that in itself, the film is itself, you know, the PhD, and it's available on the library. I'll show you how you can access this later on. I mean, this is another examination of Leanne Zilke's work. And every PhD examination is different because every practice is different. So it's not like that there's a standard model that anyone has to follow. That it's really important that the examinations are sort of embodying the nature of the practice itself. And this is just an example of a dissertation. This is Eva Prats, who is an architect who's in Barcelona, and she did her PhD with PRS Europe, and just, you know, this dissertation is available online if you want to go and have a look at it. And, you know, like, it's just, I've included this opening line here because it's how to read this document, but talks about how sort of critically that the whole PhD is situated in the studio. And this is how the PhD evolved through this process. I just wanted to move on to talk about specifically interior design PhDs. The ones that I've shown you a bit earlier are with architects. And I guess, you know, as I was saying, where there's been many architects that have participated in this program over the last 30 years, but there's been very much less so interior architects and interior designers. And when you look at the number of PhDs that there are in the discipline, they're mainly history and theory PhDs. And it's not, I'm not being critical here, I'm just, you know, it's kind of an interesting point. And I guess when I've raised the invitation to some practitioners to perhaps they'd like to think about doing PhD, I've sort of, you know, somebody asked me, well, will doing a PhD bring me more clients and more money? And, you know, well, initially I thought, no, the answer is probably no. But then thinking about it later, it's probably yes, it will, because as I flagged a bit earlier on, the value of doing a practice research PhD is that it provides space for the practitioner, the designer, to reflect on their practice and its distinctiveness, and developing insights into what one might call, you know, a practice intelligence, a practice thinking that's just not pragmatic and technical. And this is where, you know, this idea of a philosophy of practice kind of comes forward, because it's not a philosophy about practice, but it's like a practical philosophy. It's a philosophy that's through this kind of spatial, as Leon would refer to it, material, practical intelligence. And, you know, that then enables people to also position their practice, commercial practice, in a distinctive way, you know, when they're actually in the commercial realm as well. So that's, you know, it's probably a yes there. And so the benefits include a contribution also to the discipline for practitioners, and this is for practitioners, academics and students, and the emergency of a critically engaged profession at a broader social cultural level. In 2018, when I became Associate Dean, I initiated the Reflective Industry Practice Mode, which is this distinctive practice research model where it's for practitioners, designers who have been practicing for 20 years, say, and inviting them back into the university to do this PhD. And it requires people to have a substantial practice and also esteem standing in the profession. PhD will not make a practice, you know, a critical practice. Like, people have to have a sort of significant practice to come in and reflect on and to work with. And I guess the thing is, perhaps one of the reasons why this is just evolving fairly recently, at least here, is because myself, I only got a PhD in 2013, although that seems ages ago now. But, you know, it's just, I guess, there's just a number of people coming on board in terms of PhDs to then offer supervision. And I talk about specifically interior design, and I recognize that interior architecture is a term that's used much more often in relation to in Europe. But in Australia, it's not a term that's recognized unless you're an architect. And I haven't studied architecture. And I'm also a great passionate advocate for interior design, where we're thinking about the designing of interior that might be an interior, you know, it might be an architectural interior, but there can also be other forms of interior. So, but, you know, like, it's also just really important, I think, because just the, you know, what interior designers, interior architects are working with in many ways is to do with things like ephemerality, temporality, atmosphere, affect, people, experience, relations, whole range of things here. And just how we start to think about that as a kind of production of knowledge becomes really critical. And it's kind of complex because, you know, perhaps this idea of evidence-based design is not the only way that we could sort of move forward with thinking about some of these things. But this is sort of, you know, a bigger issue. So just, yeah, I'm sort of running out of time here a little bit. There's so much I want to talk about. But one thing I just wanted to also mention was that some of you might be aware of Stanley Abercrombie's book, Philosophy of Interior Design. This was written in 1990. And there's just a little, you know, there's something in the introduction which I found really interesting, because he writes about, he wrote it in 1990, right? And he writes about this experience that he had in 1987 in the United States when he attended this debate at the School of Architecture and Planning at Columbia University, and the dean there, Stuart Polshek, you know, it was a debate around licensing of interior designers, you know, registering, accrediting them. And the dean, Polshek, was saying that it's not possible that you can have a profession, something become a profession because if it lacked a body of theory. And this is something that's always been a little bit problematic for interior design. There's a lot of good work that's happening now since then. But, you know, like Stanley Abercrombie, in writing his book, he was keen to write something which was not a theoretical, philosophical account of interior design, but he wanted to write something which spoke to the practice of thinking philosophically, where it's not overtly technical and pragmatic, but you know, it's a sort of thinking philosophically about an area of endeavor. And I think this is a really kind of critical way of thinking about practice research PhDs. So this is just a diagram that I did to sort of show the sort of process for doing this practice research PhD. And it's sort of there for the reflective industry practice mode, but also for those who might come in who are wanting to, academics and so on, who are wanting to reflect on their practice in terms of whatever kind of practice they might have, whether that's teaching or as historians and so on. So you can just sort of see here how there's the various different practice research symposiums that happen. And, you know, there might be up to 7 across the span of a PhD. And then there's this kind of, you know, these intensities of moments around those PRSs, but also this line that sort of starts to become more and more developed, which is the thread of the PhD moving through. There's just to introduce, like, there's websites and things that you can have a look at, and this, I just want to really introduce them. But Rob Backhouse is the chair of Hassell. Hassell is a very large architecture interior landscape firm in Melbourne, and he's the chair of this firm. It has offices in Brisbane, Sydney, Hong Kong, London, San Francisco, Shanghai, Singapore. You know, over approximately 1,000 staff, practitioners. Anyway, Rob just graduated. He just finished his PhD with me in April 2024. And the title of his PhD evolved and became Design Process for a Distributed Network Practice, a Distinctive Mode to Leadership. And by reflecting on all the projects that he'd done over a period of 25 years, even prior to joining Hassell, one sort of thinks, you know, reflective industry practice mode goes back through your practice. So it's not just, you know, sort of, it's thinking about your practice as a practitioner over a period of time, even going back to like when you were studying. So there's this reflective process mode, did various diagrams of this. And then this is one of his significant projects. So there's really a reflecting in and through the projects. There was sort of various things that he identified that he was sort of initiating in relationship to leadership through the commercial practice, things like symposiums and publications and conferences. And anyway, this is his examination, and then 2 very happy supervisors with him at the completion of it. Sue Fenton is somebody who's from Woods Bagot. She's currently doing her PhD. She works very much, again, Woods Bagot is similar to Hasselm, being a very large firm with global studios. Her practice is very much sort of interested in working with colour. She's sort of kind of calling her PhD at the moment Dr. Colour, because she sort of has this, you know, she's not looking at the theories of colour, but that her understanding of colour through this practice that she has had for 20 years where she has been working with it. This is some work that she produced for the PhD. So I'm just flicking through these because I do want to allow time for some questions. Xing Wei is with the PRS Asia. He has his own practice, which is in Philippines, Singapore, and Indonesia, and he's also head of LaSalle Spatial Design in Singapore. Wesley Liu is also currently doing a PhD with me. He's based in Hong Kong. So it's just, you know, we're really trying to sort of encourage key practitioners to come in to do a PhD, to be situating and thinking about their practice and to be offering that back up. And then Ed Hollis, he's Professor of Interior Design at the University of Edinburgh. He actually just completed as well with me doing his PhD in 2024. Ed is primarily a writer but also works with projects in terms of history and preservation. And PhD for him was a way of sort of, he's written a number of books. The PhD for him was really a way of sort of kind of not reinventing, but refreshing his practice. He was sort of really wanting to kind of pause and think about like sort of how he was working and what he was doing. And then just a couple of younger well, not younger, but more emerging practitioners. Sarah Jamison is somebody who's always had a very experimental practice, and she did her 4th year here with me, and then 10 years later came to do a PhD. She does a lot of surfing in Sydney, and she started up her own commercial practice and found that she really wanted to come in to do a PhD to develop her confidence to continue to work experimentally in projects and not just succumb to sort of having to, you know, be all about budgets and clients and so on. And so this PhD really sort of supported her to build that confidence. So these are some of her projects. This is her laying out her PhD in one of her project spaces. And then this is her website that led to that. So I'm just getting towards the end and we can open up. And then also the practice research PhD brings in other practitioners. Amara Rahim is a dancer and very interested in interior and spatial concerns with her practice. So she was also a candidate of mine that completed in 2021. And finally, this is Sally Macareth, who's an architect in London. And she is going to be examined at the next PRS in Barcelona that's coming up. It's going to be on the 22nd to 25th of November. And so I'd really like to invite you, if you're interested. Again, it's these practice research symposiums are public events, and so you're welcome to come and have a look to see how the practice research symposium happens, and to see Sally's examination. This is what I'll do is I'll just finish here that just with. Not sure, hang on, like, I'm not sure if you're seeing this, I'm just going to think, let's just go to questions, I think, Tüüne-Kristin, and then you can come back to the practice research, all you have to type in is practice-research, and you'll get to the practice research website. And there it's got all the information, and there's lots of, all the candidates are there and all the alumni, graduates and so on. So it's a really great resource to have a look at. Anyway, there you go.
Yeah.
I rushed through all of those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Suzie, very much. I guess it has been really like very inspiring and interesting to follow what you have introduced us, and also I guess that all the colleagues who have joined now like noticed that people who have been there in this researching process are not like young students anymore, but they are carrying like a heavy luggage of their knowledge and practice inside, and it takes time. So don't hesitate to go and start this process when you really feel that you have enough practice already. But what I really wanted to ask you, as you are supervising PhD students like all over the world now, and we all know that Australia is like a new world and very contemporary and pioneer in this sense. But still, the practitioners, they work every day in their offices. Finally, when they are going to defend their degree, this has to be a written format, like a book. And like you introduced us, like Stephen Hollis, for him, I guess it would have been more easier as he's a writer. But for practitioners, there has been quite often a question, why would not it be just a building? Why I have to create a long text? And then what kind of role does this text have? Is it like an equal partner with your practice, or is one following one another, or this question?
Well, I guess the thing is, I guess the PhD is a particular kind of, a building is not a PhD, right? So it's not to say that, you know, every architect who's done a building should get a PhD. It's really important to understand that the PhD is an approach to one's practice that produces knowledge that's particular, right? And so quite often it's important to say to people that the PhD is not about your whole practice, and it's not an explanation about your whole practice. And, you know, as we know, like buildings are very complex things, or any project can be very complex, and every project has got probably an infinite number of PhDs in it. So the thing is about finding this kind of critical thread that runs through your practice, that is not just one building, or it's something that is really, I think I often talk about it as kind of like a bit of like a problematic or something, that there's this thing that drives people in their practice, and they very rarely have an opportunity to pause and think about what that is, because they're good at what they do and they practice. But there is this thing that drives that practice. And so the PhD is an opportunity to spend time with that. And yeah, sure, like there's having to do writing, but the writing is the book. It's not a book, and it's 30 to 50,000 words. And there is this challenge often for designers and architects and practitioners, artists, you know, a range of people that do these PhDs, the challenge with writing texts. And also, you know, like if English is your second language as well, you know, there's also that challenge, okay, because working with people in various different kind of cultural backgrounds and so on as well. But I think the thing is, like, again, how it's written is there's no standard format. It doesn't have to be an academic text. It doesn't, you know, like when you look at what a conventional thesis looks like for a PhD, it has to be 12-point and, you know, double-spaced and things. Whereas if you have an opportunity to have a look at Edward Hollis's PhD, it's a braided PhD. So there's 3 running texts beside each other. There's an architect who Michael Banning, who his PhD was organized around something like 40 anecdotes. So, you know, like people work with supervisors to go, okay, well, what is the best way for this text to give an account of the research that's been done as part of the PhD in order to communicate it. And the thing is, like, a PhD is a particular kind of thing. It's a qualification. It's one of the highest qualifications you can get, unless you're in America, where there's even higher qualifications. And so there's academic requirements that are there, right? And so writing is one of those. But writing also forms as one form of communication of the research. And then, as I was saying, there's also the exhibit of practice, and there's also the verbal presentation. And then there's also the hour-long discussion afterwards with the examiners. And all of that is positioned as the PhD. The text is not the PhD. It's just one aspect of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I also want to add.
Tell me, why did you do a PhD?
Yeah, that's a good question and quite often asked. But I briefly explained, but I just wanted to add that the defense events are always, at one point, they are academic defenses, but at the same time, they are very creative exhibitions. And
but just one point, we don't call them defense. We don't call them a defense. There's no defense. You know, it's
okay.
not. It's just a different term. It's really just got this other kind of quality about it that, you know, it's not. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Great. But anyways, it's very inspiring. But I guess that my answer is that also there are like different phases. At first, the phase when you like, having been in the practice for a long time and working together with the architects, with the new buildings, but also with the old architecture, and then suddenly you understand that you really have to put together this like old buildings and new users and all the different layers. Yeah. And then you're going to reflect. You see the patterns in your own work, and you see that it's actually much more interesting to dig in what is behind this physical context, what is the mental layer and social layer and so on. So I really started to work with the gentrification process, and during my PhD, it was a really very, very productive time. It took some years, but at the same time, getting and using the knowledge from the research period and from doctoral school, I was able to use it with a team, of course, in different architectural and interior competitions, winning different projects, going to the Venice Architecture Biennale and to Brussels when Estonia was the presidency of EU, designing the venues there, and in other places as well. Also, like bigger competitions in Estonia, like Estonian National Archive and so on. So it was definitely very productive. Finally, after graduating, or even before that, I also started to approach and connect this like theoretical and practical part, what is there in the discipline. So creating international interior architecture symposiums, CISO, and also editing the journal. But afterwards, this is interesting, what happened then? Then I was asked to lead the programs in Estonian Academy of Arts, and of course it's really great. You see that it's useful what you have been doing and how to share it with the students, and hopefully they grow or will be trained like great practitioners. So it's a way how we see how it develops.
Yeah. So Graham Graham's got his hand up.
Yeah.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
Thanks, Suzie. It's a lovely, really, really inspiring and interesting talk. And I've been aware of the program for a while. And after yesterday, when you showed me Ed's link, I had a quick look at that, and I've been watching that. And it's really fascinating. There's two questions. One is maybe straightforward, and that is about, I note the sort of primacy of diagramming, which is, I think, quite evident in some of Ed's work, and also as you were talking, and I wanted to ask you about that, because I thought that was really fascinating. And then the second question was, you mentioned about, PhD interior designers, interior architects is not necessarily undertaking PhDs, and I sort of have some hunches about that, but I'm not, they're kind of unfounded. But I wondered what your hunch was about that and why. Yeah.
Well, first off, it's interesting you notice diagrams, and I think in a way it's not because people have to, like this, but I think it's just this way of articulating the practice, and just showing or thinking and working with the practice actually. I know for myself, like just working with exhibitions and things, it's like, well, how do you sort of show that, right? So not by words, but, so diagrams become, and perhaps that's something particular with interior design as well, like, because often what we do may not be structure or artifact or object, it's relational. So, and the dynamics and program-based and temporal-based. So that's why diagrams, can start to do that. And look, I don't know, like with why, I mean, I think the thing is that, look, I could just be speculating, but I think there's a lot of things, and I think it's linked to why there's not such a strong kind of interior history, interior theory base as well. There's not that kind of, investment in those areas because, it could be the nature of the actual practice itself, because it's the buildings, what one does is kind of might be around for 5 years or 6 months, or coming back to this diagramming, it can be ephemeral and relational and collaborative. There's not that sort of authorship there that can just go, well, I did this, but I think, this is where I'm speculating, I hesitate, but I think there is something also around gender too. And, that just, we know in our own sort of teaching programs and things that it's still very sort of, the percentage is highly, like female, and also that, so I think there's also that aspect. And what I mean by that is that, perhaps it expands out to, well, investing in these kind of, and having the time as well, perhaps, to also, I notice in thinking about the cohort in Asia and just going, well, there's been some really great women who've been kind of interested, but their practices don't have that depth. And it's like, well, why is that? And that's because they're looking after families, So I think the practice research PhD is really adaptable in many ways. So I don't think you have to have a 25-year long practice, but what you need to have is a critical relationship to your practice, and that it has to sort of have, what's your theory why?
Oh, well, all of those things that you've said, and I also think that there's that in difference to architecture. I think in the UK for sure, I recognize this. I don't think that there is the tradition of scholarship which the architectural discipline employs, and I think we see that right the way from students starting their experience, because quite often people coming into interior design, interior architecture are just less scholarly. They kind of might be more hands-on or drawn to that. Not always, of course, I generalize, but I think there's that less tradition of scholarship. And so I think all of the reasons you mentioned, plus that as well, I think really, which I think is another.
And the other thing, like people often, because I do supervise a number of young women and they're just kind of come in to do a PhD and they sort of feel like it's this huge big thing, and you know the authority that sits around a PhD too can be very off-putting for people.
Yeah, I think
but
that's.
I just think it's so kind of critical, you know, that and you know there is lots of good work that's being done now, like you know by many people, you know, who are probably listening and so on, but you know around sort of developing the theory and you know the work that you're doing, and you know it's just and what's happening with the ECIA project. So it's not like it's not happening, but you know it's only
I'm conscious there's some questions from people, but I
and
think the fear, just the last thing to say, the fear that you mentioned earlier, you know, about it being the pinnacle kind of qualification is a big thing to take apart as well, because it's not, you know, it is, yeah, but at the same time, it's not insurmountable. Anyway, I think we should take the questions.
So I'm just very
Tuna.
Yeah, thank you. I have also one tiny question before I go to this on the list. So Suzie, you are also like supervising students who are not only interior architects, but also from another fields. How do you feel? Is this like interdisciplinary, like combination of the students and how they like get together? Does it also like develop the whole field, the creative field, or what about the methods, or how do you feel about that?
Yeah, well, I guess now excuse me, I've got this cough. I'm mainly interested in people that supervising people that are going to be making a contribution or thinking about kind of interior, spatial, temporal dynamics. And when I talk about interior, I don't mean kind of, you know, inside architecture, as you know, but you know, like dancers and painters, sculptors, you know, there are many that are working in this area. So I really, you know, for me, interior design is a meta discipline. That a number of these kind of other disciplines, interior architecture is an interior discipline from my point of view because it's making interior space. But you know, like, so I don't really sort of see this as like interdisciplinary and so on. I think that it's really about sort of matters of concern, but the issue does come up more sort of about, well, where is the contribution being made? And so that's where these communities of practice are people through their practice identify communities of practice that they're contributing into. And that's how this distinctive contribution is identified. It's not about filling gaps or filling gaps of knowledge. It's about going, well, this practice is distinctive within a community of practice and it offers up. Yeah. So I think interior design does attract people who are sort of interested from a range of different other practices and disciplines. Should we just go to the few comments, because I'm conscious we've got one.
We have also two questions from our colleagues from ECIA, like Jeremy Williams and René Pierre. And René is interested, what is the amount of work one has to collect for applying for PhD program? And Jeremy is asking who funds these programs.
Well, RMIT funds the programs. And what happens, like that when somebody's doing this practice research PhD, they're doing an RMIT PhD. And so what happens, like with the Australian federal government, you know, when somebody finishes, you know, RMIT gets some money for each completion. I don't know if it's the same in Europe or the UK. So that's where sort of some money comes in from. But yeah, RMIT funds it. It's an RMIT degree. And at the moment, as I said it in response to somebody else, we have fee waivers. So no one is paying to do it. There's an expectation that everybody that's doing a PhD will come to the PRS and they have to self-fund that. They have to self-fund their accommodation and flights if they're coming from States or, you know, Edinburgh or wherever. And but that's it. And I guess the amount of work one has to collect for applying for a PhD program, I mean, it's the thing is when somebody's making an application, like they make contact first with potential supervisors and things, and then there's they bring together a portfolio of their work. So we want to see a portfolio of work, and then have a meeting and discussion, and it's an understanding of like, you know, why do they want to do a PhD? So it's not pulling together a whole, you know, a whole lot of work that's there. And then did you get bogged? No, well, I've sort of, while setting up the PhD, it is an RMIT PhD. So it's not setting it up in Barcelona as such, and diploma and supplements entry. It's an RMIT Australian degree. And in Barcelona, we don't have a campus or anything, but we do have an office, RMIT Europe, and they're sort of there maybe, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago. You know, I could be wrong, but to really start to facilitate funding opportunities and all sorts of things. And so they help to manage, you know, that. But yeah, we're not associated with any university there. It's not co-offered. We do have, I've currently got, we've got Marie Curie Fellowship PhDs that are being offered. I've got two currently who I'm working with in conjunction with Polyme School of Design and RMIT, and they're based in Milan, and actually two of them are here now with us for 8 months. So we have co-dutels, and there's also a very important network that was established, again, maybe 15 years ago, called the Adapter Network, which sort of was really when it was setting up some of the this practice research PhD in Europe, and there was a big Marie Curie funding for that, where it was connecting up with people like Westminster, Aarhus, KU Leuven, and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Great. I think we are like briefly running out of time, but I also see that people have maybe some more questions. Where can they like find the PhDs? They are interested in a link, and maybe also if somebody's interested like more towards the approach and finances, maybe this link as well. Is it somehow possible to share?
So I shared a link, the
Okay.
practice-research.com that you mentioned earlier, Suzie. It is in the Q&A section of answer.
So just put it, I'm just sharing it here. Can you see that now? The website?
We can see just an image. Ah, no. No, it works.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
you're
this,
hovering over North America.
yeah, this is the website here. So like you just click on, maybe I'll just go to, we've just got one coming up in Melbourne next week. And so if you click on, go into one, then this is the schedule for what's happening next week. In Melbourne, it includes schools of art and fashion and textiles and design. I mean, the practice research PhD really started from our School of Architecture and Urban Design. But now here in Melbourne, it goes across the whole college. But you can sort of hear the examinations. So you'll start to see a diversity in terms of this idea of practice research, because different disciplines are coming into play with it. Sorry, I don't want to give you sort of vertigo, but just to scroll down. So to the School of Architecture and Design here. So this is one of the Marie Curie, if it will open up. Yeah, so this is Melitza. So she's making, so if you click on people's names, their you know, their abstract will come up, and you can sort of see supervisors and so on. And then and also just under alumni. So this is all the people that have completed PhDs. And sorry, just with scrolling fast down to say somebody like Ed Hollis, since I mentioned him. Sorry, close your eyes while I just did EFG.
So I think this is a great archive where everybody
can
dig in.
It's a little bit overwhelming, but
Yeah.
So, and you can see people like Tom Holbrook,
Mhm.
Holbrook, if you know him in the UK. So this is Ed. So you can just click on this, his examination, and so down the bottom of those on the alumni, you'll see that that'll take you through to both the examination and the dissertation. So yeah, so that it's sort of a bit overwhelming because there's lots of stuff in there, but
yeah, definitely. Yeah, but that's great. So everybody who has practice, is curious and critical, is like welcome to research what is there, and
it's similar with academics. Yeah, I mean, it's just really sort of moving oneself into thinking that, you know, you're a practitioner, like in whatever, even I studied history to begin with, like 8 decades ago, you know, and like I see history as a practice, right? So it's really, and I think that's one of the kind of critical things, is to understand how important it is what you do and how you do. And I think in this day and age, you know, like climate change, environment, you know, this sort of critical thinking about how we do is really vital. You know, like knowledge has to shift into that mode of sort of thinking through these things, and because there is such important knowledge that is embedded in this doing, and also the critical reflection on it. And while it's a bit of a cliche, I mean, often I use the example of the painter Paul Cézanne, right? And if he was to do a PhD, and, you know, like all those paintings he did, and just this kind of sophisticated expertise he would have about the paint color green and light, you know, that's the sort of knowledge and intelligence that bringing to the surface and articulating it, and through text, you know, because it's not just enough sometimes for people to be looking at the painting, because if they're don't have a visual literacy, right, to understand like how, you know, just how this understanding and knowledge that he has through that, but that the writing also offers it up in a different way, and in a more specific and focused way in some context. Anyway, I just think it's a really sort of critical moment to be doing this, and for interior design and interior architecture as well, because, you know, like this thing of sort of ephemerality and atmosphere and affect and experience, you know, the projects that I'm working with in the health area, you know, like where it's just mainly dominated by psychology and evidence, and it's a terrible way to be thinking about how people are in these environments. So we need to work out how we kind of grasp these other ways of knowing, you know, that aren't scientific, right? But how do we start to work with these and articulate them? Anyway, I can go on, as you can tell.
Thank you, Suzie. I think it's a great applause. And, thank you everybody who has been listening. And yeah, I give the word to Graham and Miriam to.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much
Laurie
for joining us. It was a real honor and pleasure to have you here and talk about your work, which I think is so precious for our industry and discipline. I hope we could inspire lots of people to become more critical practitioners, and maybe sign up with your PhD next.
Yeah, well, if anybody, people are welcome to email me anytime. Like, can easily just find me, you know, it's just suzie.attiwill@rmit.edu.au. So yeah.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
That's a really lovely talk, and it's also just lovely to see you again. And I think you've well earned your Friday evening glass of wine now.
Yeah.
Or beer or whatever.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to the weekend now. So thank you. Thank you again for the invitation.
Thanks, Suzie. Have a great weekend.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great Friday. Bye.
Thank you for zooming in. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye. Thanks, Rory, for organizing. And thanks, Miriam and Tuna, for hosting. It's been great. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Tuna. Thanks, Miriam. Bye.
See you soon in Barcelona.
Yeah, see you there. Bye-bye.